So there's this cold case out of Atlantic City that still doesn't sit right with anybody who's looked into it. January 12th, 1984. A Thursday, but there's no school. Teacher conference. One of those random days off you get as a kid. Gary Grant Jr. is 7 years old. He's living with his mom, May. His parents are separated. His dad's a police detective in the same city. And that morning, Gary tells his mom he's got an appointment. An appointment? 7 years old? She asks him who with. He says it's a secret. And look, what are you going to do with that? She figures it's some little kid thing, maybe the girl around the corner he likes, so she lets it go. He gets dressed, goes out to play, tells her he'll be back by 4 before it gets dark. 4 o'clock comes and goes, then 4:30. May said he never missed dinner, not once, so that's when the worry starts creeping in. She goes and asks his little friends if they've seen him. Nothing. By 6:30, she's calling her husband. Gary Sr. starts combing the neighborhood himself. He's searching until 1, 2 in the morning. Calls out of work. A cop, off duty, walking around looking for his own kid. By the next morning, it's a full department search. But here's the thing. Regulations won't let Gary Sr. actually work the case. He's the victim's father, so he's benched from his own job. And you can imagine what that does to a man. He doesn't sit still, though. He's checking abandoned houses himself, under the boardwalk, arcades, questioning random people working the games. Friday night rolls around, still nothing. Now he's going through alleyways, trash cans, dumpsters. In his own words, the streets are mean enough for an adult, let alone a 7-year-old. Saturday afternoon, a body is found in a vacant lot, less than 2 blocks from the Grant house, beaten to death. There's a pipe lying near him, probably what did it. Police try to hold radio silence so the family can be told properly before it hits the scanners, but Gary Sr. is already out there searching, exhausted, barely standing, and he walks right into the scene. He said it himself, "You don't want to believe it's him. You don't want to believe your son's just lying there and he's never getting up again." Now the investigation starts the way these things always start. Who was he with last? And that leads them to a kid named Carl Mason. Everybody calls him Boo. Boo is 12, but here's the detail that matters. He's got an IQ of 65. Developmentally, he's behind, smaller than Gary, even though he's 5 years older. The two of them were actual friends, played together all the time in the neighborhood. When police first talked to Boo, he says he wasn't with Gary that day. But then neighbors start telling detectives a different story, that Boo was with him. So now you've got this contradiction sitting in the middle of the investigation, and nobody knows what to do with it. Because by every account, Boo is this harmless, scared kid. Neighborhood scaredy cat is how one journalist who covered it later described him. That night, his grandmother drives him down to headquarters. They separate him from her, 12 years old, alone in a room with detectives. 3 hours in, they've got what they say is a confession. Boo tells them details that supposedly only the killer would know. He signs a paper, but even after signing it, he's saying he didn't do it. He gets charged as a juvenile anyway, shipped off to a detention center. And this is the part that gets me every time I read it. Years later, Boo himself said, quote, "One cop told him if he just admitted it, they'd let him go home. He was 12, exhausted, so he said, 'If you say so.'" That's a documented pattern in juvenile interrogations. Kids saying what gets them out of the room, not what's true. 3 days later, they polygraph him. Inconclusive. They test him again a few days after that. Both times, the results say he's being truthful when he says he didn't kill Gary. A month later, there's a hearing on whether that so-called confession even holds up, and it doesn't. Charges dropped, Boo walks, and the case just stops. No new suspect, nothing. 2 years pass. Then, At 3 in the morning on January 4th, 1986, somebody paints a message on the side of an actual Atlantic City patrol car. It says, "Gary Grant's dead. I am living. Another will die on January 12th if all goes right." January 12th, the anniversary of the murder. Detective Grant looked at that handwriting and said it read like an adult wrote it, not a kid messing around. A few weeks after that, somebody scratches a second message into a sidewalk. This one reads, "Gary Grant Jr. lives. I still killed him. Son of a pig officer. Payback is a..." Well, you can guess the rest. That line about the officer is what makes people think this wasn't random, that maybe this was retribution for something Gary Sr. did on the job, an arrest that got someone locked up, a grudge that outlived the case itself. No more messages ever came after that. No suspect, no confession that actually held up. Just a father who wasn't allowed to investigate his own son's murder, a scared kid with an IQ of 65 who nearly took the fall for it, and 2 messages written in the dark by somebody who apparently wanted the family to know they were still out there. May Grant said it best. She just wants whoever did this to come forward, not for justice exactly, just so she can have a little peace in her own mind. That case has been cold for over 40 years now. Alright, this one's German. It's over 100 years old, and it might be the most unsettling, unsolved case I've ever come across. Because the horror here isn't just the murders, it's everything that happened after them. Hinterkaifeck. It's not even really a town, it's one isolated farmstead, sitting alone between 2 small villages about 40 miles north of Munich, surrounded on all sides by forest. The kind of place where the nearest neighbor is a walk away, not a shout away. Living there in March of 1922 is the Gruber family. Andreas, 63, the patriarch, his wife, Cecilia, 72, their widowed daughter, Victoria, 35, and her 2 kids, a 7-year-old daughter, also named Cecilia, and a 2-year-old son, Josef, and a new maid, Maria Baumgartner, 44, who'd only just started working there. Here's where it gets uncomfortable, because the warning signs weren't subtle. 6 months before the murders, the previous maid quit, just packed up and left. And her reason wasn't pay, it wasn't the work. She said the house was haunted, said she heard footsteps in the attic when nobody was up there. Andreas brushed it off, told people she was being dramatic. Then, toward the end of March, days before the murders, Andreas finds footprints in the snow, fresh ones, leading from the tree line straight up to the farm's machine shed. And here's the detail that gets repeated in every account of this case, because it's the one that actually chills people. The footprints go in. None of them come back out. Whoever made them either vanished into thin air or they were still on the property. Andreas mentions it to a neighbor. He also tells that neighbor he'd spotted someone who resembled the old maid hanging around the near house. He does not go to the police. This is rural Bavaria in 1922. Quiet, insular place, the kind of place where you don't call the authorities over footprints. March 31st, a Friday, sometime between 6 and 7 in the evening, based on the later postmortem. Someone enters that farmhouse or the barn and kills all 6 of them. The weapon is a mattock, basically a pickaxe, a farm tool, something that was probably already sitting on the property. Every single victim dies from blunt trauma to the skull. 4 of them, Andreas, Cecilia, Victoria, and the 7-year-old, are killed in the barn. The maid is killed in her bedroom in the house, and 2-year-old Joseph is killed in his crib while he's sleeping. And there's one detail from that barn that I have to include because leaving it out would be doing this story a disservice. The little girl, Cecilia, the 7-year-old, didn't die instantly. Investigators determined she survived the initial blow. She lay there next to her murdered family for some period of time before she died. There was evidence she'd pulled out chunks of her own hair. She was conscious, alone, in the dark, next to her whole family. Nobody finds them for 4 days. Neighbors notice smoke isn't coming from the chimney. Nobody's seen the family in town. Eventually, a small group goes out to check, and on April 4th, they find the bodies stacked in the barn. It's local farmer Lorenz Schlittenbauer who leads that search party, and he's actually one of the people who comes under suspicion later, partly because at one point during the search, he splits off from the group and goes into the house alone, saying he wanted to check on baby Yosef. Investigators found that a little too convenient. He was never charged. But here's the part that turns this from a murder case into something closer to a ghost story that happens to be real. When police finally go through the house, they find signs that someone had been living there after the murders. The animals had been fed, food from the kitchen had been eaten, someone built fires to keep warm. Neighbors would later say they'd seen smoke from the chimney on days after the family was already dead in the barn. Which means, best anyone can piece together, the killer didn't do this and run. The killer stayed, ate their food, fed their cows, slept under their roof for days, while the bodies were 40 feet away. Over 100 suspects get questioned in the following months. The jealous former suitor of Victoria's, the disgruntled neighbor, even, later on, a theory involving a soldier presumed dead in the war who supposedly resurfaced. None of it sticks. No weapon confirmed beyond the mattock, which was found hidden in the barn's loft, meaning it never left the property either. No confession, ever. By October of 1922, the case goes cold. And then it gets one more twist, almost as an afterthought. At some point, the victims' skulls were sent off to Munich for further examination. This was standard practice at the time, trying to learn something from the wounds. Those skulls were lost during the chaos of World War II, just gone. So even the physical evidence that might have meant something to modern forensics doesn't exist anymore. A local pastor wrote in his diary, a year to the day after the bodies were found, that the shadow of Hinterkaifeck still hung over the whole community. Said the children in the area were having nightmares. The farmhouse itself stood for years afterward. Nobody wanted it, understandably, before it was eventually torn down. But the case never got an ending. No name, no trial. Just a family that was killed for reasons nobody has ever proven, in a house that somebody else kept living in like nothing had happened at all. February 25th, 1957. A college kid named Frederick Benonis is driving through the Fox Chase section of Philadelphia, checking his muskrat traps, when he spots a rabbit and pulls over to chase it into the brush. And that's when he sees it. Wedged in among the branches, a cardboard box. A J.C. Penney bassinet box, the kind you'd buy for a newborn. Inside, there's a little boy, naked, wrapped in a cheap, faded green plaid blanket. He's small, barely 30 pounds, and his hair looks like it was hacked off crudely not long before he died, because there are still clumps of it stuck to his bruised shoulders. Here's the detail that always throws people. Benonis doesn't call it in. He's spooked. He doesn't want to get involved, so he just leaves, drives off. It's not until the next day that he actually reports what he saw. So this child is out there alone in the cold for another full day before police even arrive. When they finally get him to the medical examiner, the picture only gets worse. The boy's got extensive bruising, evidence of chronic malnutrition, old scars on his body that suggest this wasn't the first time he'd been hurt. Cause of death? Blunt force trauma to the head. Investigators can't even nail down his exact age at the time. Their best guess is somewhere between 4 and 6 years old. And then, the case just stalls out completely because nobody has any idea who he is. The department does everything they can think of. They print 400,000 flyers with his face on them and blanket the city. They even take post-mortem photos of him, dressed and posed sitting up to make him look more presentable, more like a kid you'd recognize from the neighborhood. Investigators trace the bassinet box back to the JCPenney store that sold it, thinking that's their lead. It's a dead end. Nobody comes forward. No missing persons report matches him. No parent ever calls in. And that's what makes this case different from almost every other unsolved child murder. It's not just that nobody caught the killer, it's that nobody even knew who the victim was. For decades, this kid is buried in Ivy Hill Cemetery under a headstone that just says, "America's Unknown Child." Detectives who work the case become obsessed with it, some of them for their entire careers. Retired officers keep his file on their desks at home into their 80s. There's a whole society of amateur investigators, the Vidocq Society, that adopts the case as basically their flagship mystery, meeting for years trying to crack it. They try everything conventional detective work has to offer, and it goes nowhere. Standard DNA testing, the kind that solves most modern cold cases, doesn't work here either because his remains are so degraded by decades in the ground that there isn't enough usable genetic material. For a long time, everyone genuinely believes this case will just stay unsolved forever, that this boy will be nameless permanently. Then, around 2019, a company called Identifinders International gets brought in, and they take a completely different approach. Instead of trying to match his DNA directly to a database, which requires a fairly complete profile, they use something called forensic investigative genetic genealogy, basically the same method that helped catch the Golden State Killer. They pull whatever fragmented genetic material they can salvage from his degraded bones, and instead of looking for him, they start looking for his relatives, distant cousins, people who share small amounts of DNA with him, uploaded to public genealogy databases for completely unrelated reasons, someone doing their family tree, someone curious about their ancestry. It takes years of painstaking work. Genealogists build out entire family trees branch by branch, cross-referencing cousins on what they believe is his mother's side against cousins on his father's side, watching to see where those branches actually intersect. And eventually, they do intersect. All roads funnel down to one specific family, and inside that family, one specific missing child. On December 8th, 2022, 65 years after he was found in that box, Philadelphia Police Commissioner Danielle Outlaw stands at a podium and finally says his name out loud. Joseph Augustus Zarelli. Born January 13, 1953. He was from West Philadelphia, a neighborhood miles from where his body was dumped. He was never even reported missing. Investigators believe his own family may have quietly discarded him, and that nobody around him ever raised the alarm. So now this case has an identity, but it still doesn't have a killer. Whoever beat that little boy, cut his hair, wrapped him in a blanket, and left him in a box in the woods 15 miles from his home has never been named. There's no arrest. Genetic genealogy solved the mystery of who he was. It hasn't touched the mystery of who did this to him. And that's what makes this case so unsettling even now. For 65 years, this child had no name and no story. Today, he has both. But somewhere, whoever did this to him lived out an entire life, and if they're even still alive, they've never once had to answer for it.